This is episode 11 of season 1 of Babylon 5, Survivors. I must admit, I didn't really remember this episode at all as I started to rewatch it again, but bits of it did come back to me, and I'll take you through it now. So we start with ISN Interstellar Network News announcing that a new fighter wing is going to be coming to Babylon 5, and the opening shot is of Earth Force 1, which is the modern equivalent, well, their modern equivalent of Air Force One, except obviously it's a spaceship. Quite a swanky looking ship. It's got sort of solar panels on it, similar to Babylon 5's fins, and it's being escorted by not that many Star Furies actually. And we're told that that sort of improvement in alien immigration is trying to be got through the Senate, so to sort of open up more aliens to be permitted to come to Earth. It's quite a controversial thing because obviously, as we know, part of the backdrop of the culture at the moment is that there are very sort of pro-Earth groups around. So it's quite interesting to understand that this is very much a sort of pro-alien, pro-openness sort of president who's going to come in and deliver this new wing of Star Furies. So they don't know exactly what the president's itinerary is because they wanted to keep it quiet for security reasons. We see Garibaldi and Ivanova getting on board the 0G sort of station hub shuttle as they're discussing this. So it's one of those quite nice little details. Ivanova's jacket colouring does something a bit interesting here. I'm guessing it's because they might be using something close to a blue screen, and because her jacket is blue, it's sort of getting replaced a bit by the background or something. It might just be my DVD, I don't know, but it looks a little bit odd. It might be one of those things I need to clean up down the line if they ever redo the series. Just as they're getting to their destination, there's a detonation on board the station in one of the Cobra bays where a maintenance worker was, and it's Bay 12 that's gone up. And we see the explosion from space, and we see a maintenance worker spinning into space from the command and control deck observation port. I'm not quite sure about the physics of that, because going to there from where he was, I'm not quite sure how that works. But anyway, it looks good. So as it turns out, the maintenance worker has actually survived. So clearly his suit integrity held to a certain extent, but he's in bad shape in Medlab, and it seems likely that at this point that an industrial accident caused the problem because the crews are overworked and inexperienced. But Garibaldi equally isn't ruling out sabotage. Major Kimmer from Presidential Security is on board the station ahead of the arrival of Earth Force One, and it transpires that Garibaldi knew her dad. And it becomes rapidly apparent that it isn't going to be a comfortable working relationship because she immediately takes over Garibaldi's investigation of the explosion. Sinclair tries to engage Garibaldi about what went on in the past, but he gets sidetracked by Jakar with issues, and then he has to jump in as Garibaldi starts to take his frustrations out on a low-level perp on the promenade. They sit in the Zocalo to discuss what just happened afterwards, and we notice here that Garibaldi doesn't drink alcohol. He orders a water, not anything else. And he begins to tell the backstory. So 17 years ago on Europa, he was stationed there. It was basically a complete cesspool. Half the command staff were on the take and the other half didn't give a damn. And he turned to drink. But during this time he met a guy called Frank Kimmer, who was a shuttle run pilot. And he became friends with him and his family, and that kept him rooted. It's also where he met Liana, Major Kimmer, who called him Uncle Mike. He was too good at his job, unfortunately, too good at his security job, and someone put out a hit on him. But unfortunately, they killed Frank Kimmer instead of Garibaldi. However, the explosion got pinned on Garibaldi's negligence, and Liana closed up and he crawled back into the bottle. Elsewhere, Kimmer is reviving Franklin's patient against his wishes, and he says, the maintenance engineer says it was a bomb in the bay, and with his dying breath he accuses Garibaldi of having planted it. She pulls rank in a sense now, and she demands that Garibaldi be suspended and that she take over security due to the imminent presidential visit. Sinclair's between a rock and a hard place here, so he asks Garibaldi to hand over his security card and his PPG. Mr. Cutter gets a man, but it was, as Garibaldi says, way too easy to find the smoking gun evidence in his own quarters. Apparently scans now say it was a bomb, a C-15 explosive. Garibaldi is going to be taken in, but he has now had a chance to try and get through to Kimmer about her father's death. So Garibaldi bolts, and Sinclair stops Kimmer, putting out another points on him, but knows he's just delaying an inevitable override with the presidential authority. Ivanova decides the comm system needs a check, which will tie it up for hours. Interesting, on the sort of the main walkthrough area, there's a sort of a holographics Knights game being played, which I think it's probably done with CG, I think. So again, that's nice. It's a nice little touch, and it's clever for its time, if that is what's going on there. Garibaldi goes to Londo for information, which is interesting. Now dressed in civilian clothes, which Londo sort of laughed at him for. And meanwhile, Kimmer has another run-in with Ivanova, but realises that her ship can probably get through to Earthdome using its own communications system, because Earth Force 1 might be close enough to communicate with now. And they know Garibaldi has links with Londo. Fortunately for Garibaldi, Londo has had a favourable run with Ilaros, the goddess of luck and good fortune, so he can loan Garibaldi some cash to get himself into the ambassadorial zone to have a chat with Jakar about Ragesh 3 and some missing Centauri ducats, which of course the saboteur was paid with. Londo sees himself and Garibaldi as odd men. They don't quite fit in, and he doesn't like to see him pinned as he is, and so he's going to help him. So Jakar gets a visit, and he knew that Garibaldi was coming because of course the Centauri and Narn keep tabs on one another. Jakar effectively offers Garibaldi an escape route off the station, having assured him that the situation he finds himself in is not Jakar's fault. And he explains that energy, matter and enlightened self-interest are the three laws governing Jakar's universe. So effectively what he's saying to Garibaldi is that the Narn regime is always on the lookout for talented individuals who they could put to good use for the benefit of the regime, and that's basically what he's offering him here. So it's quite interesting that, you know, Londo is quite willing to help him, and Jakar will also help him, but very much for his own reasons. It's not quite the same sort of relationship, even though he's always been quite good with Jakar in the past. So we see that Zeta Wing, the new wing, is coming in into the main docking bay of the station, and Ivanova tells them that they're going to be routed to Cobra Arm 3. And we see a nice touch of detail here where they're sort of being taken down on lifts, having gone into the main docking area. So of course they've got to get out into the Cobra bays once they've gone into that main docking area, because the Cobra bays are distinct from the main docking zones, and that's clearly how it's done. So that's a nice point of detail. In the alien sector, Garibaldi is trying to get help from Negrath, who of course won't help Garibaldi because he's a cop. And despite the fact that he's got fugitive status and then basically a wanted sign floating above his head, metaphorically speaking, and Negrath throws him out. And unfortunately he throws him out right as security are going through the alien sector. So there were shots fired, but Garibaldi manages to evade his pursuers because of course he knows the station like the back of his hand. But he then runs into the credit chip stealing perp from earlier, and a brawl ensues. And the brawl actually turns into a 3-on-1 when two Drazi turn up, sort of abseiling in from somewhere. I have no idea how they turned up. But anyway, they come in and Garibaldi's on the floor. But Sinclair then catches up with him and evens the odds for him, and is trying to persuade him to go to Medlab. But then a General Netter is on the Gold Channel line, and that distracts Sinclair, and Garibaldi just sort of quietly slinks away and keeps on steering clear of security patrols. So the difficulty is that now, because Kimmer's got through to General Netter, he has orders direct from the horse's mouth, so he can't keep dodging Kimmer's requests anymore. But he makes it clear that he knows about Kimmer's personal history with Garibaldi, and that she's already determined his guilt because of it, and so she's not on the level in terms of what she's trying to do to him. And she does half acknowledge that accusation. But the other difficulty that we have is that Garibaldi's still using Centauri ducats to pay for stuff, and she knows that, so he's not painting himself in a great light, because it still looks like he got paid in ducats, and basically took that money to do this act of sabotage. At this point, I still couldn't remember how this all sort of resolved itself, although I did start to have an inkling. So if you were watching the episode yourself, obviously you'll already know, but I'll keep assuming that you don't. So Garibaldi ends up in a bar called the Happy Days, as in DAZE bar. Nice one. No Fonz though that I could see. And he basically tries to lie low in there, and he borrows a hat from someone, having given him a ducat. The hat is returned once the security officer has left, but there's a trade of a bottle of booze, and unfortunately Garibaldi accepts the bottle of booze. And even worse, the guy who he borrowed the hat from initially, who gave him the bottle, is then seen grassing him up as a data terminal and speaking to security on the screen. So now a very drunken Garibaldi is not making any new friends in the bar, and is in no condition to look after himself anymore. And so Kimmer turns up and says that the blip is in custody, and Cutter goes off to check the new Cobra bays, where the new wing is, as they're preparing to launch the new fighter wing for a flyby on the arrival of Earth Force One. So Garibaldi is seen sort of surrounded by security officers in his own security office now, and it turns out that Officer Welch has searched Nolan's quarters. He was the maintenance guy who was blown up at the beginning of the episode, and he appears to be home guard because he had a remote detonator in his quarters, but of course it was never used, because Garibaldi says that they knew from earlier that they were using a plasma driver in the Cobra Bay when the bomb went off, and the vibration from it could have set off the bomb the guy planted earlier than he was anticipating. So as a result, the bomb was in there, and he was going to detonate it from a remote position, but actually he got caught out because of the maintenance work that was going on, and he ended up getting caught in the blast himself. So Kimmer asks why the Home Guard would want to be doing that, and Garibaldi notes that the President is about to come on board, and that he's going to be launching pro-alien moves that would be anti-Home Guard's views of the world. But she says that Cutter's checked the bays. Now the penny drops. The only person who wasn't close to the rest of the group was Cutter, and he was the one who found the evidence incriminating Garibaldi, who suggests that Kimmer had better inspect the bays personally. Because after all, it's her job on the line, effectively, is what he's saying to her. So there's then a showdown with Cutter, with the new wing counting down to their launch time. Garibaldi gets the upper hand and manages to take Cutter's link off him, and convinces Ivanova to hold the launch countdown at T-1. As Garibaldi is patched up in Medlab, Sinclair reveals that they found bombs on all the bay doors, and they would have crippled the station if they'd opened. Cutter got money from Earth after Nolan named Garibaldi, and of course he drew it out in the station in ducats. And so that wraps up how Garibaldi got framed, basically. So Garibaldi sort of looks back on his past experience. He says Europa, Mars, Orion 4, he keeps making the same mistake, i.e. going back to the bottle. But Sinclair says at the end of the day he crawled back out of the bottle, and he encourages him to seek help and not go it alone next time. Because it was Kimmer noted earlier in the episode that the only real friends he had on the station were basically Londo, Ivanova and Sinclair, and that's kind of it. So he's always quite isolated. So Garibaldi and Kimmer do manage to reconcile, or at least start to, just as she's about to leave to rejoin Earth Force One's team. He asks her to keep Santiago safe, and acknowledges that they both died 17 years ago, but also survived despite the hurt, and all they can do is keep going And it's bound to hurt because they're just human, they're not robots. So this is character development in a big way for Garibaldi, and it just drives home that he's quite flawed. He's made mistakes in the past, and he'll make them again, but he does have allies on the station who are willing to go to bat for him and pull him back from the edge. We have a lot of sympathy for him. He'd had a hell of a day, and when you're tired, it's easy to make decisions that you wouldn't otherwise make. Anyone who has young children will appreciate this. The larger question, perhaps, is whether he can now stay dry, having been off the booze for so long. And he also owes Londo, a favour and or money. So, slight question mark hanging there as well. There's also a slight question mark at the end about a possible relationship with Kimmer. I may be reading into too much into the looks exchange. It's probably more sort of a shared bond of pain, I think, given the past history. And she must logically be quite a bit younger than him, because when she says Uncle Mike to him in a flashback, she's quite a little girl. So it's not really clear how old she is now. I mean, she's obviously done very well for herself, but I guess there's probably quite a big age gap between them. So the subplot related to President Santiago, who we never actually saw in this episode, and his shiny Earth Force One ship, which, as I mentioned at the beginning, I thought was maybe a little bit light on escorts considering it's a presidential vessel, but presumably they were only going through very sort of well-known jump gate systems where perhaps there were other escort vessels that we didn't see. He's clearly quite a Democrat in sort of modern US terms, not that I know a great deal about US politics, but it seems he would therefore be inherently pro-Babylon 5 and its goals of creating peace amongst the various alien races. Clearly the station was overdue the new fighters and will now be more combat ready, although there did seem to be concerns over the readiness of the Cobra Bays themselves to receive them. Some more nice touches in terms of the depth of culture on the stations. Garibaldi clearly familiar with the ins and outs of the sort of the downside establishment of ill repute. As I suppose you'd have to be as a security chief. You'd have to know where the Crims hang out. Some good hand-to-hand fight scenes as well. It's not like Garibaldi miraculously comes out of it unscathed, which is realistic. I mean, he had an opportunity to try and get some more time off, which Franklin actually spoiled for him, which he wasn't overly impressed by. But basically, he just had sort of bruised ribs and so on. He wasn't seriously hurt, but he is going to be bruised for a bit. That's apparent. And right at the end of the episode, there was a nice shot of Kimmer boarding one of the personnel shuttles that I didn't remember seeing before, and the landing feat of it reminded me of a Space 1999 Eagle. And don't forget, at the time of speaking, and Happy New Year, by the way. I think I might not have said at the beginning, but if this comes out on schedule, it'll be 2021. So Happy New Year. And yeah, my Space 1999 Eagle might still be up on Lego Ideas at this point. So if it is, please feel free to support it if you'd like to. I've got a Lego Ideas playlist on the channel. If you're watching this years later, ignore this last part because it won't make any sense to you. That's great. So hope you've enjoyed that. I'm doing some other videos around this at the moment, which will all already be on the channel by the time you see this, but I'm just trying to broaden things out a little bit and see what people think of that. So thank you for listening. That's the halfway point now, actually, for season 1, and so the next episode will take us into the first half of the second part of season 1, and I will catch you for that one. Thanks very much.